Says Russia is now warning the U.S. not to launch any attacks on the Syrian government forces, saying an intervention there could lead to, quote, terrible tectonic consequences, not only on the territory, but also in the region as a whole. So with Vladimir Putin's regime telling us to butt out as the overwhelming carnage and mass killings continue, will it stop? Ambassador John Bolton joins us, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador, as we've talked here before, it is an overwhelming humanitarian catastrophe beyond dimension. Hospitals being bombed, apartment levels, houses being leveled, citizens targeted. France and others at the Security Council say it's a war crime by Russia and Syria. Do you think Vladimir Putin is guilty now of war crimes?
Well, I think almost certainly, if you look simply at attacking civilians, that's exactly what's going on. The Russian and Syrian regime argument would be that the opposition forces are interspersed across the city, and that's probably true as well. But look, when a conflict reaches this kind of humanitarian disaster, there's very little that outside forces can do. This reflects a failure 5 years old right from the beginning of this conflict. And I think now with the Assad regime on the verge of achieving a strategic objective they've had almost since the outset, nothing is going to change this now. Do
you think that this pulverizing of that city, the killing of its citizens, that the Syrians will be able to retake Aleppo?
Well, it looks that way. They've got the forces inside the city cut off. They've offered, as you noted, to give them an escape route. I think if I were part of the opposition, I wouldn't trust the Assad regime as far as I could throw it. So I think this is just going to grind on until the regime forces win, and it will represent a major consolidation of their position and allow Russia and Syria and Iran and Hezbollah to go on to their next objective. This reflects a collapse of the opposition forces, very significant for the overall conflict in Syria.
You know, we've seen this before. Putin in Chechnya. The Observer back in 2000 had an investigation where they killed 343 innocent citizens in Chechnya. They bombed convoys, humanitarian convoys. The same thing we are seeing right now. And we are powerless. The world, no matter what they say over in the Security Council, the world is powerless to stop this when you've got families and people cowering in their rooms with no electricity, getting bombed, basically just waiting to be killed.
Yeah. Well, let's be clear. The Security Council is utterly irrelevant in this circumstance because of the prospect of a Russian veto if anybody decided to do anything. So for those who are profound believers in the United Nations, here's a lesson to learn. But I think the United States, by its failure to understand how determined Russia and its ally Assad were to win this war, bears part of the responsibility. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Barack Obama lives in a world of words. Vladimir Putin lives in a world of power, and he is winning in Syria.
Well, John Kerry at the UN was recorded in those conversations saying there was dissension in the administration, that he favored some type of military intervention way back, you know, during the Red Line, and that didn't come.
Yeah, well, maybe he did, and, you know, we now have a public dispute between John Kerry and Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. I think this reflects the ongoing chaos, not just in Syria, sadly, but chaos within the Obama administration. It shows the president moving into lame duck status when his cabinet officers are in public disagreement with one another, and it obviously bodes very poorly for any prospect that the United States can reconcile its own internal governmental disagreements, let alone do something on the ground.
And finally, should the administration years ago have bombed Assad's runways? Should we have taken out his helicopters so he can't drop those barrel bombs? Should we have taken more decisive action when the administration did not?
Well, you know, back at the time of the beginning of this conflict, at the time of the Arab Spring in 2011, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of Defense for Secretary of State for Barack Obama, it would have been nice to have a clear American decision what our policy was. And a major part of our failure in this conflict is the president's inability or unwillingness to make a clear decision because he didn't want to do anything to undercut his chances for a nuclear deal with Iran. That is the bottom line, in my view, on the American failure in Syria.
And the result today, this continuing horrendous killing that shows no signs, sadly, tragically, of stopping. Ambassador John Bolton, always good to have your insight. Thank you for joining us as always.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course.